Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar this morning. We really appreciate your time and interest in this particular topic. We're really excited about our two presenters that we have with us today. If you weren't aware, June is Dairy Month, so we thought it was really appropriate to focus on a dairy topic, and certainly would encourage everyone that's participating to drink lots of milk, eat lots of ice cream, consume a lot of cheese. Really need to support our dairy farmers out there. So with us this morning is Emily Yeiser Stepp, who's the Vice President of the National Dairy Farm Program, and then also Justin Risser from Meadow Vista Farms, LLC, which is right here in Lancaster County in Bainbridge. So welcome to both of you, and thank you for your time. So Emily is responsible for the management of strategic initiatives for the U.S. dairy industry social responsibility program that encompasses animal care, antibiotic stewardship, environmental stewardship, and workforce development. She also leads the day-to-day work related to animal care, and Emily has been with the National Milk Producers Federation since 2016. She began her involvement in the dairy industry through the 4-H leasing program and was involved in Maryland 4-H and the leasing program for over 10 years. She then went on to pursue a Bachelor of Science degree in Animal Science with a minor in Agribusiness Management from Penn State University. Go PSU. Upon graduation from Penn State, Emily worked for ABS Global Inc. as their young sire program specialist in the Mid-Atlantic region. She then went on to attend graduate school at Virginia Tech in 2011 and obtained a Master of Science degree in Dairy Science. Additionally, Emily served as a Dairy Initiative Manager for the Center for Dairy Excellence in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and as the Dairy and Beef Extension Coordinator for the University of Maryland, prior to starting with the National Dairy Farm Program. Emily and her family maintain a small herd of 30 registered Holstein and Brown Swiss under the Spots Pride prefix that are housed at Palmyra Farm in Maryland. So welcome, Emily. We're glad to have you. And as I mentioned, Justin is with us, local Lancaster County farmer here. We always like to have the presence of Lancaster County farmers and being able to talk about the work that they do and how they're supporting the industry and their environmental initiatives and animal care initiatives. So Justin, thank you for your time. Yep. Just a few housekeeping items before we turn it over to Emily and Justin. Feel free to ask questions in the chat or the question panel at any time. We'll wait until the end of their presentations and then we'll have a time for a Q&A. The webinar is being recorded and you can find the recording of this on our YouTube page. Also, a link will be sent out after the webinar. You can also find previous webinars on the YouTube page as well as on our website. So with that, again, thank you to Emily and Justin, and I will pass it over for you to take over the show.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And Justin, I will turn it over to you and you can give some more of your background. Justin and I overlapped a little bit in school, but he was at Del Val while I was at Penn State. So he actually was in school with where my cows live today with Ryan Shank and others. And so Justin, if thought you could give a little bit of overview of what Meadow Vista is, your background, and then I'll turn it over to you to give some of the introductory slides to what the dairy industry looks like today.
Okay, so yeah, I went to Delaware Valley University, graduated in 2006 with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Dairy and Animal Science. After I graduated in 2006, I returned home to the dairy farm in which we were in the process of expanding from 280 cows to where we're at now, 850 cows. Came home and took over the herd management and then just kind of grew in that role until 2011, where I purchased part of the partnership, bought in. We have two different entities. We have a LLC, which is the operating entity, and then we have a limited partnership, which is all the real estate. And I bought into both of those. And so over the last, it's been 9 years now. Slowly, accumulating more financial responsibility when it comes to ownership, and for the most part it's myself and my cousin Eric who are the next generation of partners, and we're about evenly yoked as far as financial stakes in the business, and then both our fathers are starting to transition a lot of the ownership over to us and decision making as far as what our next steps are. So I have a wife and 3 kids, and we live right here on the farm, and I manage the cows and the heifers and the employees, and Eric does the crops and the nutrient management. So that's just a basic overview of our operation, and we'll get started with the slides here. So if we want to look at the life cycle of a cow, we start off with what we call our wet calves, and those calves are usually anywhere between 0 and 2 months of age. They're called wet calves because they're on milk, and then from there they're weaned off of milk. Usually, industry standard is somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks, and then they are put on a grain of some sort to develop the rumen. Some of the show guys like to push a lot of hay. I will say most of the commercial guys tend to jump right to the grain. Either work very well, and then from the age of about 2 months up through about 5, that's when a lot of the commingling of heifers is happening on the farm. They're put into groups, social groups. A lot of times they're vaccinated. We get them off. The first 4 months is where you see the most structural growth and potential of a calf. So there's a lot of intensive management of the heifers less than 4 months of age. And then from about 4 to 12 months, it's just a lot of maintenance. They're very, at that age, they're a very low time commitment animal. You basically feed them. They're well vaccinated at that point, socially sound, and then you bring them up to about 12, 13 months of age, which is usually where most producers are starting to breed. And some guys, we still have some producers that are waiting till they're about 15 months of age, simply because they want to have a bigger animal at calving. I will say most commercial producers are looking to breed their animals at 13 months of age, so that they calve in at 22 months and they have a more fast track to the lactation group, and you have less overhead if you have an animal that's a little bit younger. 1 or 2 months less of feed cost in the animal, and so they don't have quite the bill to pay off once they enter the milking string. And then the mature cows, once they calve back in, they milk until they're about 225 days carrying calf once they're rebred, and then they go dry for 60 days. And I will say most of the guys out there still shoot for a 50 to 60 day dry period after the cow is confirmed pregnant. They give her 50 to 60 days. It's just research has proven that a 50 to 60 day dry period is what she needs to build her body back up for another lactation. Next slide. So lactation begins at birth, and that's one thing, when we have school tours here, kids and parents, you'd be surprised how many still don't understand or still don't really put 2 and 2 together that cow is not producing milk until she has a calf. And so basically that animal has only money into her up until she's 2 months or 2 years of age when she calves. She's got quite the bill to pay off, and so she's been fed and raised for 2 years. And most producers will say that they probably have anywhere between $1,600 and $2,000 into that animal before she calves. So getting a healthy animal to calving is the ultimate goal, because she won't pay off her bill fully probably until she's in the middle of her second lactation. Next slide. So on the dairy, when the cow calves, we identify male from female. Most of the males on dairy farms are sold either in veal or for steer to be made into steers, or for future genetics, sold out to a stud. That group of producers is becoming smaller and smaller as we've moved into a genomics market. The number of players that are capable of staying in that market to have animals that test really high genetically is becoming smaller and smaller. So I will say most of the bull calves go either for veal or for steers. The females, most producers keep most of their heifers. There is quite a movement within the dairy industry to limit the amount of females that you have on the farm. Years ago, there was lots and lots of heifers around, and then as we went through the downturn from 2016 on through 2020, the value of heifers and the value of milk cows declined substantially. A lot of lenders were leery about the number of females that were being housed on each dairy farm. And like I said, that those heifers only have a bill to pay. They're not contributing at all to the cash income. And so to carry too many heifers was starting to become the trend of too many producers, where now lenders are really starting to crack down on how many heifers each farm can carry in a ratio to milk cows. I will say that, I have lots of friends that have more than one heifer for every cow. I have on average about 0.8 heifers for every cow. So if I had 100 cows, I would have 80 heifers, and that's been my ratio for the last 10 years. It keeps my barn full, but not to the point where it keeps my barn full, but I don't have too many to sell, which is good because it doesn't seem like you can really gain a lot by selling freshening heifers and stuff like that. Next slide. So the top dairy breeds, the Ayrshire, Brown Swiss, Holstein, the Holstein that's red and white to your far right, Guernsey, Jersey, milking Shorthorn. By far and large, the Holstein's the most popular, although the Jersey is becoming more popular today simply because they are 2/3 the size of a Holstein, and they can put out a lot of fat and protein in their milk. So when you actually standardize their milk on components, they match up really, really well with the Holstein as far as capability to produce income. And they also are a little bit more heat tolerant. So in areas such as the Southwest and California, they're able to withstand the 80, 90, 100 degree temperatures because they're a smaller, more compact animal than the Holsteins. So the Jersey breed is actually becoming very popular. The challenge with milking both Holsteins and Jerseys is their size difference, and having a parlor that can accommodate both animals is a challenge. The other breeds, I would say that they've been very consistent. I think some of them might actually be in the decline a little bit, but they are more known for individual breed characteristics when it comes to showing and things like that, but then also components. Certain breeds have a little bit more fat and protein in their milk, and I think a lot of it just goes back to preference on farms and what's been done over the years. I know that there's people that are passionate about Ayrshires and passionate about Guernseys, and they make them work on their farm simply because of the heritage that their farm carries. Next slide. Is this where you want to take over, Emily? Or you want me to?
You can finish out this one, and then I'll take it from there if that works.
Yeah. Yep, that's fine. So, like I said, I graduated in 2006, and I remember when I was graduating, the talk in our graduating class was that there were 60,000 dairy farms out across the nation. There were 60,000, and there was talk of how many there was back in the 1980s and 1990s, and how 60,000 was a lot less. There was a steady decline. Now here we are in 2020, and we have data in this slide up through 2019, and we're approaching half that. And what really, what you really can't see there is the 2020 data. It's still declining because of the result of what happened in 2016 and 2017, 2018. Just there was a cycle of 4 years that there was not a lot of money made in the dairy industry, and now COVID-19. with the there was several months right before COVID-19 that allowed a lot of producers to pay off some of their debt that they accumulated over the last 4 years. And there was lots of talk in the industry about having a really good year. Now COVID-19 has kind of taken that away. I'm still optimistic that 2020 could be a fairly decent year near the end, but here in the middle part of 2020, it's quite a challenge for those that didn't have any sort of hedging or any sort of milk price locked in. So you see a steady decline, and I think Emily's going to talk about which states have been declining and which states have been growing.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. And this is an area, what Justin was mentioning, what we at National Milk Producers Federation are constantly assessing and looking at. A lot of the policy developments that have helped, I think, farmers amidst the COVID pandemic should, as Justin said, should improve the outlook for the rest of the year. But right now, the milk checks are not as lucrative as what we had all anticipated in 2020, and there's some different programs that we obviously have solicited for within the current farm bill that some took advantage of, but not everybody did, as 2020 prices were supposed to be looking pretty solid, and so we've been fighting the good fight, trying to make sure that our that allocation of the support programs amidst COVID have helped. So hopefully we won't see as significant of a decline in farm numbers as we've seen over the last few years. But just in 2019, as Justin alluded to, we saw the most significant drop in pure farm numbers that we've seen since the early 2000s and into that 2008, 2009 range. So today we're at probably right around that 34,000, maybe a touch under licensed dairy farms, and all dairy farms are licensed and inspected to sell milk. So they have to meet very specific standards to comply with what's known as the Grade A pasteurized milk ordinance. And this is what is really the regulatory body over food safety in the milk space. And so that has a lot of the rules and regulations that are passed down through the state departments of ag and the state departments of public health that also, make sure that everyone has a wholesome and safe product to purchase at the grocery stores. And just by method of the transportation model that we have within the U.S. in particular, it does require that milk is picked up from the farm at least every 2 days. Justin, you guys are probably on a daily, if not hourly, I would imagine at this point with your herd size, but that also ensures the freshness and quality of the milk that you guys are purchasing on your grocery store shelves. And so across the state, as Justin mentioned, we've got quite the diversity, which I think is truly the beauty and the beauty of the U.S. dairy industry. The diversity of farm numbers, farm sizes, is really what this slide is showing you. We've got the top number of farms in the U.S. is clearly in Wisconsin still. They have a lot of dairy farms, but also, as I mentioned last year, the states with the most number of dairy farms also saw the largest number of attritions. And so that's Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were impacted probably the most significantly in that vein. Following out probably in that Minnesota, Ohio, New York was relatively steady, but certainly also was impacted to a certain degree. And then, as you can expect, some of our smaller states, maybe those states that have not ever had a very large presence of a dairy industry, you can see Alaska and Hawaii are still holding strong with 2 dairy farms there. And those, I always offer that when our evaluators are ready to go and evaluate those farms, that I would be more than happy to accompany them on those trips. But as you can see, just kind of some spattering in those, I'll call them more those random states, but that's really where the most number of farms are in the upper northeast as well as the Midwest. But then as you look to kind of what milk cow numbers have looked like, You know, we've seen even in that farm number attrition rate, we've actually seen an increase in total of milk cow numbers. And due to some of that attrition over the last 2 years, as well as what COVID's impact has been, we have seen a slight decline in number of cows, but we're still in that around 9.3 million cows throughout the United States producing the amount of milk that across the board. And so it's seen kind of a steady 2% increase over the past 10 years. We've seen this downturn, but what our economist at National Milk has designated or seen just in the last few months is actually that cow numbers are starting to increase. And when typically you're anticipating potentially lower than normal prices from a milk price standpoint, you really see cow numbers start to slough off, and we're actually seeing an increase. So it's kind of a unique time within the industry, and something that I think, you know, outside of everything else going on in the world, will be a really interesting reflection upon kind of what this trend is going to produce as an industry for us nationwide. And so while those top states for number of farms may look different, you can see where the greatest concentration here is of cows. California, Wisconsin, and New York have consistently led in those areas over really the past 10 to 15 years. I think when I was doing Dairy Bowl, when I was younger, those were still our top states for those metrics of total number of cows. But what you've also seen, and Justin again shared this, that in particular, a lot of those Jersey cows are currently living in Idaho and Texas. They're more heat tolerant. They're also more just weather tolerant. And you've seen those states with lower regulatory restrictions, kind of folks from California migrating to Idaho and Texas, given more open space, less regulatory requirements. From a lot of different avenues. And so Idaho and Texas have really been a booming area for the dairy industry. If any of you all have followed the Chobani story, Chobani put a plant in Idaho a few years ago, and that's really been a surge of migration of where farms have either been put up or farms that are maybe been looking for other areas to farm have moved to. Comparatively then, you know, it's very similar. The number of cows in total in the southeastern part of the world, in those smaller states, those less traditional dairy states are right there. But you know, you've got quite the range of number of cows from California at 1.7 million to Alaska at their 300 cow number. But overall, you know, while our cow numbers have either increased or at this point have stayed or have started to decline just slightly, we've really seen an increase in the production of milk per cow. And very similar, I think sometimes there's always the question of, well, why is it that way? Why are we continuing to have higher milk production per cow? Are we pushing them? Are we doing things that maybe we shouldn't be doing to get that level of production? Where it couldn't be further from the truth. Cows are very like any other mammal when they're not stressed, when they're comfortable, when they are in their ideal environmental situations, they are able to produce more milk. And so through cow comfort, through genetics, through nutrition, that Justin will talk to here in a little bit of what he does at Meta Vista, really allows for this production increase to be recognized across the country. And this has also been a huge driver as to why our export markets have become so significantly important to the dairy industry. We have a lot of milk here domestically, and thankfully, for better or for worse, COVID has seen a lot of that commercial disappearance in the grocery stores, but not so much in the retail space. And so we've really continued to rely very heavily on our trade relationships and export markets to get milk moved so that we can maintain prices hopefully better in the future. And this is just a testament to how sophisticated and well run our US dairy farms are today. But you can see that same kind of spattering across the country. with where the most milk is being produced, obviously very heavily in those states where there's more cows. But you can see also here in the Northeast, we've got a really nice representation and have a significant marketplace, particularly for fluid milk volume. And this also, you know, just as a different depiction, the numbers are slightly outdated just because USDA's numbers don't always keep up with current information all the time. But you can see where the percentage of milk is coming from herd size in this table. Those herds that are largely in those Western states where they do have the ability to have larger herd sizes, we're getting almost, and we're knocking on the door of about 60% of our milk in total nationwide coming from herds of 1,000 cows or more. And I know certainly in Lancaster County, the average herd size just across Pennsylvania is still in that 75 to 80 cows. Justin is obviously one of those larger producers that would fall in that 500 to 1,000 cow range. But it's really frankly a disproportionate representation of number of farms compared to the milk volume that's produced in the country. I think there will continue to be, and again, the beauty of the diversity within the industry, there's going to continue to be opportunities for our smaller herds to continue to have a role in the U.S. dairy industry market. But I think that, like largely what you guys are probably seeing in Lancaster County, a lot of diversity that's been embraced, a lot of different avenues of not just milk production, but other businesses that some of those farms have had to explore, cheese stands, other direct milk marketing approaches to really continue to thrive at that herd size. I don't know, Justin, if you want to comment just, you know, the number of families that you have and how you guys have landed at that 850 number. That might be a good anecdote here to share.
Yeah, so we have 4 different families if you count my parents and Eric's parents, and so the 4 of us, 4 family units that are owners of the business, and then we have all the employees. But to kind of springboard off of what Emily was saying, for these herds that are less than 100 cows, you know, they really have a hard time matching up with 1,000 cow dairy as far as cost of production. So they're going to be several dollars off, higher in cost of production. If let's say 1,000 cow dairy might be $15 to produce 100 pounds of milk. For a herd less than that, they're probably going to be at least 17, if not 18. There might be $3 there. So what they need to do is the reason they survive is a lot of their labor is heavily discounted. A lot of these tend to be plain sect or conservative, and so a lot of their children are responsible, and they're not paid the same as my employees that have, you know, the benefits and the hourly pay. Another thing for them to survive is they need to have like niche markets. So some of these might pursue raw milk permits. They might make cheese, they might make butter, and might make ice cream. So they have a different revenue source. You know, for me, 850 cows, you know, I kind of toyed with that idea. I'm like, well, you know, we do have a nice farm, and people like seeing nice clean farm. You know, why don't we sell some milk in some gallons? And so then I pencil it out, and you know, when we do, you know, almost 8,000 gallons a day, if I were to sell, you know, 25 or, you know, even 50 of them a day, I'd be further ahead just to do what I do best and milk another 25 cows a day, you know. So it's hardly worth my time to do something like that. Whereas a guy that's a lot smaller, you know, that's going to be a huge revenue source for him because he doesn't want to milk another 25 cows. He wants to, his barn is probably full at 75, and he doesn't want to build a bigger barn. And so that allows for the survival of the small herds. And I think that will be a driver for them to continue to survive in the economic conditions that we face, in which, you know, your cost is going to be the reason that you're a winner or a loser in this industry. So next slide.
Oh, yep. So I'll take these, Justin, and then I'll kick it back to you for the rest. So yeah, as Justin was mentioning here, you know, the average herd size, as you can see, I think a lot of times, especially when I teach, either teach some college classes or I'm talking to folks maybe not as in tune with what's going on kind of in the industry, I always ask, well, what would you consider a big farm, a lot of cows? And most of the people are thinking it's more in that almost that Kentucky average herd size, 100 cows, 80 cows, when in reality, you know, a herd size of Justin's almost doesn't even come close to the average herd size in some of our western states. And that's the reality of how those herds have functioned. Again, the space is certainly something that is advantageous and working in their benefit to have that number of animals. So you can see where our largest herds are really consolidated there in the Southwest region. And here on the East Coast, again, we're landlocked, right? So we can't expand much further than we can unless we're going to rent land or purchase it at crazy amount these days. And so you're seeing more, I would say the more of the East Coast farms are going to be in that 70 to 100 cow range, where our West Coast farms are going to be much larger herd sizes. And so that's reflective again of the top states for milk production. And then you can also see here that just those annual milk production by state is heavily concentrated kind of where everything shakes out in those states that continue to be leaders: Pennsylvania, New York, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. Iowa, to a certain extent, still kind of teeters every once in a while. And then again, as we mentioned, some of those Southwest states, California, Idaho, and Washington. And later on, we've got a slide as to where most of the milk processing occurs. And you can see that where those milk processors are is very similar to this map being shown here. So Justin, I'll turn it over to you to share a little bit about what your farm looks like and how you guys address some of these different items on your operation.
Okay, so Emily was talking about the production per cow, and a lot of that is attributed to these four categories that we're going to be talking about today. And you know, when we talk about production per cow, you know, some people want to talk about, you know, why are we working these cows too hard? And my answer to that is no. You know, the animal will produce what she's genetically capable of doing, and that's because she's been bred to do so. But then also, as Emily said, one of the things that holds a cow back is stress. If you think about, you know, your work, when are you the most productive, and when are you the least productive in your own workspace? If you're feeling stressed, a lot of times you might be irritable. You might do things that would hinder you from doing more work, such as, you know, surfing the internet or just wondering and having anxious moments and things like that. The same is with cows. When cows are happy and content, they do the things that allow them to produce more milk, which is they go to the feed bunk and eat, they rest. They're not wandering around and walking. We want our cows to rest, because when they rest, they actually more blood flow goes to the mammary gland, the udder, and allows for more synthesis of milk. They walk to the milking parlor, but there again, you know, we don't want lots of steps between the barn and the milking parlor. We want them to be able to go there and then come back, grab a drink, a bite to eat, and then rest some more. So as we talk about these topics here, you know, I look at them through a lens of how can these things that we're doing allow our cows to be the best cows that they were designed to be. Next slide, Emily. So when it comes to housing, calves, almost all calves are separated at birth, and a lot of that is to prevent any sort of disease transfer in the first 6 weeks of life. And we can see that there's different housing setups for heifers, but with young calves, they are born with a very primitive immune system, and most of their immunity is passed on through colostrum and antibodies produced by the mother. So for the first 6 weeks, they don't really have much immunity to different diseases. So they're kept separate in hutches or in stalls, so that as their immunity builds, they are then allowed to, like I mentioned earlier, socially interact in group settings when they're about 8 weeks of age. And then from there, a lot of the trend of the industry has been to either put heifers out on pasture or to put them in open front barns. And the open front barns with high roofs, as you can see on the picture on the left, is designed for air quality. That's one of the biggest things that holds heifers back is respiratory disease. And so if you can have a good exchange of air, and you can have them in a environment in which you get lots of air exchange, you kind of prevent any sort of stagnant pockets in that barn, and from them breathing in the air of other animals, you'll have a thriving animal. And then there's also been a push to get heifers on freestalls, stalls that they are able to lay in and then get up and move around in a group setting. And the reason that producers want to do that is because it actually trains them at a very young age how to use a freestall for when they are in the lactating herd, because most of the cows today are milked in a freestall barn. Still some in a tie stall barn, but by and large, the freestall barn is the setup of choice. Next slide. As far as cows, like I said, there's some still milked in tie stall barns, which are usually so your overcrowding ratio, or your ratio in your barn, is always 1-to-1, one animal to one stall. Whereas with the freestall, what the advantages of to the freestall barn is you're allowed to put more animals in the pen than you have stalls. And the idea is that some cows will be up eating, some will be drinking, some will be socializing, and so that stall will be open. So you could, in essence, have maybe 10 or 15% more cows than you have stalls, whereas in the tie stall barn, they do everything in that stall, and so there's a 1-to-1 ratio there. And so from a commercial standpoint, the guys with the freestall barns actually have a little bit of an advantage there, because they are able to milk 10 or 15% more cows in the same space as those tie stall guys are, because they're turning over that stall. That stall is being utilized all the time just for laying down, whereas the tie stall guys, they're utilizing that stall to eat and to drink, and it's not being fully utilized as the stall it should be. So there's that advantage that guys with freestall barns have over guys with tie stall barns. So under milking systems, there's lots and lots of different ways to milk cows. As Emily shared, there's a big boom in dairies in the Southwest, and one of the reasons why you can start a dairy in the Southwest is low capital. So one of the biggest things that's on your balance sheet in the Southwest, because there's lots of space in the Southwest, Texas, you just drive and drive and drive, and you just see open space. And that's really what a lot of the dairies in the Southwest and even up in Idaho look like, just big open space lots. And so the biggest thing on your balance sheet is going to be your milking parlor and your cows. Whereas here in the Northeast, some of the biggest things on our balance sheet is land, to own land to haul manure, and then also the barns that we build, because we have the climate that we do, the cold winters and the hot, humid summers, that we need to have cows inside with sprinklers and fans. Whereas in Idaho and in the Southwest, they have the heat, but they put up shades. But a lot of times they don't have the humidity that we do. So they don't need to have the sprinklers to the degree that we do, because they're a little bit more arid. But within milking systems, there's the rotary parlors, like in your top right, where the cows go around in a circle. They go on, and then till the time they complete that rotation, they are done and milked, and then they walk off. tie stall on the bottom right, where everything is brought to them, including the feed and the milking pail. And then on the left, you have the milking parlor, where cows are brought to the milking parlor, and they can range in size from 4 on a side to, I've seen as big as 80 on a side. The only thing that matters is, do you have the labor to fill that milking parlor? And you can have, with 80 on a side, you might have 6 or 8 guys in that milking parlor milking cows around the clock. But the one thing that's consistent across the industry is to, minimize the time that cows are standing. And so tie stalls, that cow can lay down right until that milking machine is put on her. She has an advantage, whereas the larger commercial guys, they do have to wait to be milked. And so when they're standing there waiting, they're not eating and drinking and lying down. So from a comfort standpoint, that's the one barometer that we always, go with, is where does she spend her time? If she's waiting, she's not doing what we want her to do, and that's eating, drinking, and lying down. Next slide. So Emily, I think you might be able to talk a little bit more about this than I would.
Okay. Yeah. So, generally speaking, the majority of milk in the U.S. is processed by dairy cooperatives. So Justin is a member owner of Mount Joy Milk Cooperative. And so all of our farmers, or most of our farmers, do have that member ownership in a cooperative. About close to 70% of milk produced in the U.S. is done so through a cooperative relationship. The others are done through more of a direct processor relationship. So as I mentioned, Chobani, they or other entities that maybe do more cheese production. They're particularly up in the upper Midwest. And in the western states, they may have a more direct relationship where a farm ships milk directly to a processor, and that goes to typically cheese production or other type of dairy product production. You see those again more in the upper Midwest. Wisconsin has a lot of cheese processors, as well as that Idaho and Pacific Northwest areas. But overall, there's about 130 milk marketing cooperatives. And National Milk Producers Federation is the trade association that represents those cooperatives. So all of those logos that you see on this very maybe convoluted state graph are our members of National Milk. That's not it doesn't encompass everybody, but our largest ones would be Dairy Farmers of America, California Dairies in California, and Land O'Lakes would be the top 3 cooperatives that process the most milk across the country. And so there's 130 of them across the country, and some are owned by the same folks, and some are small, some are big, but they all, really do and truly are owned by their member farmers, which is, I think, a testament and why I do enjoy my job. As when I was at the Center for Dairy Excellence, I got to work every day with farmers directly. This is a new world for me the last 4 years being in this role at the cooperative level. But it is a lot of fun to kind of see how the cooperative structure works and how they do really approach it and represent their farmer member owners. So again, in the upper Northwest or upper Northeast, sorry, mainly you're going to see Maryland, Virginia as a co-op in the Pennsylvania area. Land O'Lakes, DFA. Again, Mount Joy is kind of I'm going to get this wrong, Justin, but it's kind of a subsidiary of DFA now, and in a way, shape, or form, right? And Agrimark is actually the co-op in New York that does the Cabot cheese product. And there's also a lot of those kind of smaller co-ops upstate Niagara in the New York market. But I would say, generally speaking, in the greater Lancaster area, you've got some of those smaller cheese processors as well, but largely DFA, Land O'Lakes, and Maryland, Virginia will be the folks that your dairy farmers are shipping milk to. But also, I think there's always that ask as a consumer, how do I get local milk? And truly, any milk that you are purchasing is truly local. The majority of milk is processed within 250 miles of the location of where the farms are, and most of that milk doesn't travel any further than actually 100 miles. But you can just see the dynamic of how milk moves. Makes for some very interesting dynamics across the country. There's a lot of different relationships between even competitor co-ops to make sure that milk gets a home where it needs to, because as a member of a cooperative, those cooperatives have a contract agreement with Justin to say, I will find a home for your milk, and you will get paid for that milk. And so you may have seen some of the rhetoric at the beginning of COVID of folks having to dump milk. And while that's unfortunate, thankfully, as member of cooperatives, all of our farms that are in our cooperative structure still did get paid for that milk that had to be dumped. So it's not always an ideal situation, but being there is, and obviously I'm a little biased because Justin pays my paycheck and Justin's a part of a co-op that helps pay my paycheck. But there's a lot of benefit of having that cooperative as a help compared to a direct processor relationship that maybe that security isn't always provided in more of those direct ship relationships. So I'll just say, you know, it kind of all leads into, and then Laura will stop talking and hopefully have some time for some questions. But the program that Justin's a part of, we have a national dairy farm program, and that is a quality assurance program. It's titled Farmers Assuring Responsible Management, and it's really an attempt of the dairy industry in a unified approach to give our dairy customers, the Walmarts, the McDonald's of the world, those folks that are purchasing dairy products, and our consumers, our everyday folks that are going to the grocery store, the assurance that their milk and dairy products come from a good place. And that's the program that I help to oversee. We've got a variety of different program areas that we touch on, as Jeff mentioned, that really embrace all of kind of those social responsibility pillars between animal care, antibiotic stewardship, environment, and workforce development. But it is a relationship between national milk producers. Again, we as the trade association and policy body for the dairy industry, in addition to there's a national program, a checkoff program, where 15 cents of every 100 pounds of milk that is produced goes into promotion and research dollars that hopefully will drive continued dairy product purchasing and consumption at the consumer end. And so in 2009, we formed this program as a collaborative effort. We as National Milk and the Farm Program kind of work to provide those assurances, evaluate dairies, and gather the data at the farm level. We take it that far, and then Dairy Management Inc., our national checkoff association, in addition to our local checkoff associations, each region has a local checkoff. My sister, again, I'm totally just selling everybody out here, but my sister works for the local checkoff association. So we all collaboratively work together to use those data and proof points that the farm program collects to convey what we are doing on farms, because not everybody, as Justin mentioned, not everybody's able or is comfortable doing farm tours. Not everybody is able or comfortable having a Facebook page. And so how can we best communicate what we're doing on farms as more of those expectations around transparency and where our food comes from come forward in our consuming public? This is an avenue of doing that. And so again, it's really just to provide those assurances to our consumers and customers, but we are obviously, we're dairy farmer funded, we're dairy farmer led, and we work through our farmers, our cooperatives and processors, as well as our customers, those dairy customers, to ensure that we as an industry are continuing to strive for continuous improvement. I think generally speaking, nobody expects perfection, but we certainly want to demonstrate to those people that want to buy dairy products that we're working every day to better ourselves as farms, better ourselves as the industry, and really better ourselves as the program. And so in that, these are, again, those 4 pillars of the program itself. Truly, animal care and antibiotic stewardship go hand in hand. We're a science-based program. Our standards are all outcomes-based measures. So I'm not, as a program facilitator, I'm not going to tell Justin how he needs to meet the benchmarks that we put out for animal care, but as long as he meets the benchmarks, we really let the cows tell us what their welfare is. And part of being a science-based program is also that we recognize that you can't have good animal care without responsible antibiotic use as well. And so where maybe certainly in Lancaster County and in the southeast part of Pennsylvania, a lot of our poultry producers have been asked to move towards no antibiotics ever. That's just not something that we are willing to embrace as a dairy industry at this point. We want it in our toolbox so that if animals get sick, we can ensure the greatest amount of animal care. And then additionally, some of these other pillars around social responsibility is our environmental stewardship, and obviously being in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, I think the greater Northeast and Mid-Atlantic are sometimes light years ahead of other parts of the country, but we are trying through our program to demonstrate what we're doing from an environmental footprint standpoint, a GHG footprint, and eventually likely we'll be looking at some of the water quality and quantity areas. And then our latest program area that we've added on, as Justin mentioned, a lot of his job, and I'm not sure if he loves it or some days probably hates it, is around employee management. And so we've developed a program area with educational resources and tools related to HR and safety practices. And we have a pretty robust governance structure. We've got a farmer advisory council, different technical task forces, and then any of the decisions that are made around the program do work through a full governance structure of the National Milk Committee structure. And this really ensures that we're striking the right balance. I think each demographic that we have to work within and represent, we always end up a little bit uncomfortable with where we land, but that means that we're making progress in the right direction. And so it's really it is a dairy industry led program, which again is a testament to what we want to do as a dairy industry to continually improve in all of these program areas or silos that the farm program touches. And largely the three key components that, regardless of any of those program areas that we have worked within, again, work within the science and best management practices. We have a variety of reference manuals on our website available, and those kind of serve as our Bible. That's our scientific literature that's been done on what are the best practices for animal care or workforce development or environmental practices. And then we translate that into a second party evaluation. So Justin will have someone from Mount Joy Co-op or DFA come out and do an evaluation on his dairy that goes through, again, those animal observations, facility observations, reviewing protocols, and to verify that what's in the protocols are actually happening on the dairy. And that it's a way of, again, providing those assurances. But we call those second party evaluations largely because those folks have relationships with a Justin. And so sometimes we get criticism around, well, is it just the fox guard in the hen house? And so to maintain the integrity of the program and to make sure that our co-op and processor folks that are doing those second party evaluations are doing their jobs, we do work through a third party vendor to verify that what is being done by those second party evaluators is upholding that integrity of the program. So I think largely, and then we'll finish up here, but any quality assurance program, whether it's a dairy industry assurance program, or if those of you that are involved with other, audit type of structures, that while those are wonderful, they are just a snapshot in time. And we hope that through the farm program scope across all of those program areas, that we're creating a framework and a foundation for sound on-farm practices and inspiring a culture of continuous improvement. But also, working alongside, and this has been something that since myself and a few of our other newer staff members have jumped on board since we started about 4 years ago, because of our backgrounds in working with farmers, we realized that we really needed to engage and provide more value directly farmers. And I'm sure that Justin can roll his eyes a lot of times at the amount of paperwork that we've asked for in the past to be done with this program. But what we're really trying to establish is working alongside and creating that value at the farmer level so that a culture day-to-day can be ensured across the board. We as a program can't control that, but Justin can on his dairy and his leadership and his management. So while we really do hope that eventually we can eliminate the threats to consumer trust, we do know that in any industry there are going to be things that happen, and unfortunately that trust may be eroded, but by having a program in place, we can hopefully make strides to reduce that as much as possible. And then, you know, we're accredited. We are certified through the International Animal Welfare Organization through ISO, and so we were the first program to be ISO certified. There's a lot of animal welfare programs across the world, and the International Animal Welfare Association did come up with a set of standards to say, okay, if you're operating in the US or if you're operating in New Zealand, let's make sure that there's a level playing field, and you know, you can apply for that certification. So we're very proud of that certification, and certainly a lot, as I mentioned, those export markets have continued to be an interesting dynamic over the last few years. But animal welfare being ISO certified in the US has really taken any type of negotiating in that arena off the table. And with that, I encourage you, if you have further questions, particularly about the farm program, feel free to visit our website or reach out to us. On there, we've got a contact us page and also have a general inbox that we monitor on a regular basis. But it's I'm biased, but I think we've been making some pretty significant strides over the last few years, and hope to do the same with continued partnerships and working with folks like yourselves to continue to provide value to our farmer community. And so with that, I think we'll stop, Justin, and open it up for any questions if we got some time for that, Laura and Jeff.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Emily and Justin. We did get a few questions in, but just to really highlight, you know, I think at times people or those who are not associated with the industry really don't understand how complex and competitive it is, and the appropriate management and strategic objectives and critical thinking that's necessary to really be successful. So Justin, I just commend you and, you know, your family members there for being successful, because it is a tough industry to be in these days, and really only those top producers and great managers are really going to survive out into the future. So we certainly wish you luck and are glad you're producing milk right here in Lancaster County.
Thank you.
So we have a question here referencing back to some of the numbers pertaining to the number of farms by states, and the question is exactly where do those numbers come from? So Emily, maybe that's most appropriate for you.
Yeah, so the number of farms per state, the USDA will track those numbers, but then also those licensing and the licensing through the pasteurized milk ordinance will provide the number of farms per state that at least have a grade A license to produce milk. So USDA uses their census data to develop that. And ongoing just monitoring through their systems. Justin, I'm not sure if Pennsylvania has additional pieces. I know the center was involved in a few surveys that way, but I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I would say by and large, the most accurate number is going to be your USDA number. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question is what's the difference between pasteurized and ultra pasteurized?
Okay, so ultra pasteurized means that it's shelf stable, unrefrigerated. So a lot of those and I don't know if you've ever tasted ultra pasteurized, but a lot of the creamers that are just sitting out in cafes and coffee shops, they're ultra pasteurized, but it gets mixed in with your coffee, so you never really taste the difference. But there's a taste difference. Pasteurized means it was heated up till about 167, 170 degrees for about 30 seconds and then cooled down, and it kills the three the three biggest pathogens, which is tuberculosis, brucellosis, and listeriosis, I think, Emily, if I'm correct. And it basically, it doesn't sterilize the milk, but it kills the big three in raw milk that we need to be concerned about. Ultra pasteurized, it's basically it's cooked over 200 degrees, and it gives it like a cooked flavor. If you ever tasted it, just right out of the vacuum bag that you'll get it in. It can sit in your pantry for months, as long as you don't break the seal. And so basically the advantages of that is just being shelf stable and able to sit out unrefrigerated for hours on end, and not have to worry about sticking it back in the refrigerator. But there is a taste difference.
Great, thank you. And then the last question that we have here, unless we receive a few more, is how does organic milk fit into the picture?
I'll start, Justin, and then you can pick it up. How about that? So organic milk, from an industry standpoint, the majority of the organic milk production is encompassed within our farm program standards. So we have about 98% of the fluid milk supply, which also equates to about 98% of our farms are involved with the farm program. So they not only follow the organic standards, but they also follow our farm program standards. The difference is not so much in the milk itself, it's actually in the management of the animals. So as I mentioned, we are supportive across the board as a program of using antibiotics in a responsible manner. An organic producer for organic certification have a litany of different requirements that they're obligated to maintain. One of those is no use of antibiotics on animals, and if they do use antibiotics on them, those cows need to either go to a different farm of a commercial process, or they make a career change into the beef production realm. Also, they are not able to use any type of synthetic reproductive hormones. So some of our farms do use reproductive hormones very similar to IVF in women, that allow for the synchronization of their reproductive cycles. And so organic farms are not able to use those products. And they also do have a pasture access requirement for, I think, Justin, I'm probably going to get this wrong, I think it's about 120 days out of 365 that they must maintain some type of pasture access for those animals. So it's not so much, the milk itself is not any different, because they all go through the same pasteurization, homogenization processes, but it's more of a management choice. And Justin, I know, has interacted, one of my friends growing up has actually made the transition from a commercial operation to organic. It's not because he necessarily believes in the management practice, but at the time, the processor that was offering an organic contract had a significant premium for producing organic milk. And so it made sense for them to produce organic milk for that additional dollar per hundredweight. But Justin, you're the one who knows this much better than I do.
Well, there's another aspect, and that's involved in the feed. So there's a cost associated to producing organic milk, and it's going to cost you more, and that's why they need to be paid more. For us to go out and feed the corn that we're feeding, with all the latest technologies and the resistance to sprays, and we can spray Roundup on all our corn because we plant Roundup ready corn. So it's very cheap. Just go out, spray Roundup on all our corn. The corn thrives, all the weeds die, and we get almost 30 ton to the acre of corn, high quality corn. When you're feeding organic cows, there's a lot of stipulations on what kind of sprays you can use. I mean, you can use herbicides and pesticides, but there are a lot of outdated. They're very low efficacy. They're not the latest and greatest technologies, so your corn yield's going to be less. And so and then also on the antibiotics, they are allowed to treat animals, but in only certain conditions. It's a lot of supportive therapy, meaning, you know, you give shots of vitamin B complex, you know, you pump her with electrolytes, you try to treat her secondary. The infection is, I would say, primary, but then you try to help her overcome it by giving her secondary attention, which is, you know, keep her hydrated, keep her cool, you know, suppress the fever. And I, you know, as a producer, I want what's best for my animals, and so I desire to have antibiotics in my toolbox. And you know, dairy's not a terminal market like pork and chicken. You know, I put 2 years of investment into that animal. As far as feed, I want her to stay around for her to have 4 or 5 calves. And if she gets sick as a 2-year-old and I can't give her antibiotics, you know, I really lost out on her, and I never gave her the shot that I wanted to. So it really hamstrings you, and there's that cost, and that's why organic guys will be paid, you know, 30-40% more than non-organic guys, because they have to recoup the losses that they are incurring by going out and doing different management practices.
And regardless of which milk you choose to drink yourself, all milk is tested free of antibiotics. So any milk that, regardless of if it's commercial or organic, does get tested before at the farm, before it leaves the farm, when it arrives at the plant, and even when it's bottled. And so even though Justin is able to use and have antibiotics in his toolbox, he has to follow specific withdrawal times, both for milk and meat withdrawal, so that there is no risk of getting any type of antibiotics in the milk. So that's something that regardless of which product you were blessed to have the options of milk that works for us and our families. But you can feel confident that regardless of what milk you buy, it's safe, it's wholesome, and it's free of bacteria and antibiotics.
Yeah.
But, Emily and Justin, thank you for your time. We're running a little long here, so I think we'll end the webinar. But really, just want to appreciate your time. Certainly, I know, Justin, you know, farmers are busy these days, and giving up an hour it can be an inconvenience for you. So we really appreciate your insight and wisdom. Obviously, both of you have a great depth of knowledge in the industry and your particular areas of expertise. So we really appreciate your time. For our attendees, thank you again for attending our webinar. We really appreciate your interest in this topic and in future topics, and want to thank you for supporting the trust. So until the next time, stay on the lookout for our next webinar, probably coming up here in July, and we will see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.